You've done the work, you've built the habits, you've made the sacrifices, and the results are still almost. Not failure, almost. Here's the thing, it has nothing to do with your strategy. It has everything to do with the signal that your frequency is broadcasting right now, and whether that signal matches the frequency of what you're building towards. You see, most people never look at this because it's invisible until you know what you're looking for. This is how most people understand the work. And so I want to draw this out here for illustration purposes. So you have an individual here, then you have a circle here. So you have the person on the left, and then on the right, you have the result. Now, there's also a line in here, okay, between the arrow here in the gap. And so most people understand that in order for you to get your desired result, you have to improve this person, yourself here, and you have to optimize the actions that you're taking, which then will lead you to the result. But you see, something lives right here between the actions that you're taking in order for you to get your desired result. And this gap in here, you see, it doesn't respond to effort. It doesn't respond to discipline. It doesn't matter how disciplined you are in terms of getting your desired reality. It responds to the signal that your internal operating system is running. And most people are broadcasting a signal that directly contradicts the result that they're trying to build. And it's not because they're doing anything wrong. You see, the problem here is that they haven't been shown this layer and how it works. And I've worked with a lot of different entrepreneurs, creators, founders, and I noticed this specific pattern. These individuals already have a tremendous amount of success, but what they have been doing is producing results that are consistently one level below where their capability actually is. And the reason most people don't realize this is because they don't really understand the frequency, the signal that they're putting out, which is getting them a certain result outcome that isn't what they actually want, just keeping them stuck exactly where they are. And in this video, I'm going to show you exactly what that gap actually is and how to be able to get to the other side where you're putting out a frequency that is actually getting you the outcomes and the results that you actually want instead of keeping you stuck where you currently are. So here's what we're covering today. So the first thing that we're going to cover is the signal that most people miss. This is where you're going to learn what your reality is actually responding to and why most people are working on the wrong layer entirely. And then the second thing is we're going to walk through what your frequency actually is. This is important to get a structural definition and understand how this actually works and what exactly it is. Because it's important for you to understand what your frequency is built from and the architecture around it. Because if you don't understand how it's all comes together to create your frequency, then you're only going to have bits and pieces of it. But here in this video, you're going to learn exactly what this frequency is and how you can work with it so that it's actually emanating the results and the outcomes that you actually want. And then finally, we're going to go over the magnet system. This is a 6-step alignment framework for building a signal that matches the result instead of contradicting it. So let's jump into this. I want to give you context and I want you to understand fully what your frequency actually is. So your frequency is essentially this. So frequency equals identity, stability, how stable your identity is, and is in alignment with who you actually say you are, plus your emotional baseline, plus your behavioral consistency. So notice this here. It's all about your identity stability in terms of making sure your identity is stable and showcasing exactly who you are. And then your emotional baseline, how you react to things. Do you have and what I call a positive mental attitude, okay? Where most people's baseline, and they wonder why they're stuck in the same place, their emotional baseline is like this. And so if you average all this out, it's just all over the place, right? Where the emotional baseline needs to match the identity, frequency, baseline of the result that is required here, because you are here and you are the person that's trying to get your result. This identity, stability here is one version of you. This next one here requires, let's say, V2 of you. And so this V2 version of you that has this outcome, this result, is going to have a positive mental attitude, okay? Like this. It's going to be very baseline, okay? Not too high, not too low, because the emotions are very, very important here. They're the language of the unconscious, okay? The subconscious mind. So the behavioral consistency is how you are acting in alignment with your identity in terms of who you say you are. And so here, the V2 version of you that is required to get this result, this outcome, if you are not having the behavioral actions that are consistent with this version here, then all of this is telling essentially the universe and the world, because keep in mind, everything is a reflection, okay? And so if you're not reflecting this out internally yourself, right, and holding this baseline, and then that's being reflected out, whether you're doing this both externally and internally, it's reflecting out. If that isn't this V2 version here, in terms of an alignment of it, then you're not going to get what you want, because you are not in alignment with the frequency of this V2 here. And a more simpler way for you to understand this is really, this is your default. Let me fix this Y here. Your default way of being, okay? This is really, at the end of the day, your frequency, your default way of being in terms of, are you normally somebody who freaks out and has super highs and lows, or are you somebody who's pretty calm and steady? Now, it's okay to have times where maybe it rises a little bit, maybe it goes down a little bit, okay? Understandable. But can you catch yourself and notice when you have these highs? And I always talk about having this perspective, okay? 5D perspective, where you see everything down, okay? And so your ability to notice all the spikes and see the patterns happening in real time, like, hey, I'm about to freak out right now, or hey, I'm feeling a certain way and I'm frustrated, I'm angry, I'm annoyed, whatever that may be that is causing you to have an emotional spike. You want to see that pattern from up above and see, hey, this is not me. This is just a pattern, a response that's happening automatically. And then now I'm aware of it, and then I can then start to move into the positive mental attitude space and state where my default way of being is now more calm, more steady. There's a very steady baseline that's there, which is the frequency of this V2, which will allow me to get exactly what I want. Now, think about this all. How do you react to things when pressure arrives? How do you hold your standards when they are tested? When you say that you're going to do one thing, but you don't follow through, or when you don't speak up because people are trying to maybe belittle you or maybe not take you into account, and you're just like, want to keep the peace and you don't speak up for yourself. And I would say even most importantly here is, how do you act when nobody's around you and watching? Because all of these play a factor into your frequency, and it's very important to keep in mind all of those different things ultimately come down to the default way of being. Now, I want to show you the two different sections here in terms of what a weak signal is and what a strong signal is, okay? So on the left side here, let me brace this here a bit. The left side is the weak signal, and this is the strong. The weak is overthinking. You say you're going to do something, but you don't follow through, which then proves to yourself that you don't actually want what you're saying that you want, this result. If you say you're going to do it in terms of something you put your mind to, and that you say, hey, I'm going to put down this task or these tasks to-do list of A, B, and C, and if I don't do it, then that tells me that I don't actually really fully want the result because I'm inconsistent. Okay, so very important to follow through with what you say you're going to do. And then seeking validation instead of with your own self. And then you have emotional spikes, just like up here we walked through, where you have these huge spikes up and down versus having a solid baseline here of a positive mental attitude, understanding that you are always going to be able to figure things out and come out on top no matter what happens and whatever the circumstance or event may be. So on the strong side, you have clarity. And clarity, as I just mentioned, in terms of being able to understand that you have the ability to look at a certain event, situation, experience from a 5D perspective, seeing the whole thing entirely and shaping the narrative. Something happens to you that's negative, causes you a spike. Okay, what can you learn? What can you take away from this? Having the perspective of, you know what, it is what it is. I'm going to always come out on top. And when you have that perspective, this allows you to not have this huge swing and be swayed in terms of emotional inconsistencies all over the place, and be level-headed because you know that you're always going to figure it out. So next one here, decisiveness, consistency. You do what you say you're going to do. Self-trust. You trust yourself and your ability to figure it out and make things happen regardless of what is put in front of you. And then here you have a calm confidence. I mean, listen, I get it. I understand. There's always going to be things that throw you off, right? But those are the exceptions to the rule, because if you're here and you have a solid emotional baseline, and maybe you have a little bit of a spike up here, okay? There's always going to be like a little glitch. So let me even write like this, okay? Here's a full line, and you're like this. Oh, something happens, okay? It's all good. Up, something happens, and it shouldn't even go down this far. And that's even maybe even too high right there. There should be small, okay? Boom. Right, like this, something, okay? Coming down. Just small little jumps, right? Like, we are all human, we get it, we understand it, that things are not always going to play out exactly how we would like. This is the situations that happen all the time that are out of our control. They suck, they're unfortunate. However, it's about feeling the emotions. Maybe you're just like, man, this sucks. Like, I cannot believe this happened. Feel it, acknowledge it, accept it for what it is, and then move on. This is what you're doing here, because you're going to inevitably have small little minor spikes because things are going to happen and you're going to be frustrated from time to time, right? But it's ultimately, remember, the default way of being, okay? Now, I want to go over the misdiagnosis, why the almost keeps happening. So trying equals lack of signal here, because when you're trying and you're chasing and you're trying to go after, you're broadcasting a signal that is scarcity. that is of you not having what it is that you already want, right? The result, the outcome, the version 2 version of you that already has all of that. Because what ends up happening here, and this is really important for you to understand between where you currently are and where you want to be, is because when you're trying, this signal is going out there and showcasing to the world externally, but also internally, that you need something to happen and that you don't already operate at the level where it does. So it's this message that is being conveyed, whether you realize it or not, that you don't actually have something that you already are supposed to have internally first, and then have that be externally executed on and shown to you, right? In the real world, it's giving this energy and signal of you not being there yet and you needing to make that happen and to manifest itself for you to feel that you're actually operating at that level. However, you need to be already there, operating from that level, like, hey, I already have it. It is what it is, right? Positive mental attitude. You already know that the outcome is yours and you are following through with clarity, with being decisive, with consistency, with self-trust, with calm confidence. However, perhaps it just hasn't manifested itself externally yet. And it always has a little bit of a time lag because you first need to do it internally, have all the understanding and the internal knowing that you are going to get ABC outcome or result. And then it manifests itself externally because you operate from that frequency, right? You have the identity stability, you have the emotional baseline up here, and then your behavioral consistency is all there. So you're not trying, okay? You're not trying anymore. What you're doing is just being, okay? Your default way of being. Very, very powerful here. So let me show you now the magnetism loop. So put this right here. Magnetism loop. So you have your identity, goes into emotion, which then goes into action, and then it gets you a result, which then gives you self-trust, right? You start to trust yourself in knowing that I'm capable of this. Yeah, this is mine. This is already done. And then from here, this actually builds, go right here, stronger signal, okay? Now, think of this as like a little tiny dot here. This is your signal, okay? And this is where it currently is. And then you get a result, and then your signal becomes stronger. So now your signal is stronger, okay? Because you have built self-trust. Think about it. Think about all the times that you have thought about wanting to achieve a certain result or outcome, reach a new version of yourself, maybe land a new client or increase your revenue, whatever that may be. Before, you were like, man, I don't even know if I could ever reach that or do that or get that outcome over here, right? But then after a while, you started to put in the work and you got a result because you took action and you had your identity and emotion all in alignment and you got a certain result, and you were like, let's say this little dot in here, and you were like, man, I've achieved a great amount of success. And then your self-trust started to build and continue to build, and it got you to where you are today, right? However, this V2 version of you perhaps requires you to have almost like a sun size of an amount compared to a small little planet, okay? And that self-trust needs to be coming through this magnetism loop, however, also stabilizing the identity. What does this V2 identity look like? What about the emotional baseline, the behavioral consistency? What does that all look like for this V2, right? So it's important for you to realize that doing this loop here, you're always going to continue to build your signal and have it become stronger and stronger. But the most important thing here is that the signal that you're broadcasting here in this magnetism loop needs to be consistent. It has to be your default way of being, your new way, right? New default way of being. Okay, so now let's go over the magnet identity alignment system. So let me go ahead and erase the board here and we'll jump right in. Man, I need to get a new eraser. Okay, so magnets. This is the identity alignment system. And this is a acronym here. This is a 6-step system that operates at the signal layer, not the strategy layer. What we're doing here is we're calibrating our identity so we can get the exact outcome and the result that we actually want. So the first one here, M, match the identity. So for this, you want to understand and really dig deep into who, in terms of what version of you, okay, naturally has what you are building towards. And the very important distinction here is that it's not about who you want to become. This needs to be present tense. So the question here is really centered around who is the person for whom this outcome is a natural consequence of being who they are, right? So it's about understanding that this individual is getting a certain outcome naturally because of who they already are. And you need to ask yourself, are you running that identity right now? Or are you just performing a version of it? And oftentimes that's what happens, right? We are trying to get a certain outcome, certain result, and we need to match the identity of who is naturally going to attract that and have that already. And so we need to get very clear and precise about what does that version of you look like? What time do they wake up? How do they see the world? How is their emotional regulation? How is their emotional baseline? How is their frequency? Are they going to freak out when something happens that you currently freak out right now, but then them going through the exact same thing where for them, it's going to be very calm. But for you, it's all over the place, right? This is for who, in terms of this individual who's acting from this baseline, right? Emotional baseline. So that's what you need to think about. Really think about the characteristics, the views, the perspectives, all of that version of you that naturally has this outcome. Step number 2, A, you want to anchor emotional state. This is where you want to stabilize your internal environment. How do you feel when things go south? When things don't go and work out exactly how you planned, or when something comes up that is like a roadblock for you, or an issue and a problem? How do you act? How do you feel? How do you label that situation, right? Because at the end of the day, one of the biggest ways to stabilize this is the labeling the situation as a non-issue. Oh, whatever, we'll get through with it. I get it. You're going to feel it. You're going to experience it, the emotion, all of that. But remember, how many times have you thought about back in the day where you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know how I'm going to get through this. I don't know what I'm going to do, but you always found a way. And that's the lens and the perspective that you need to be taking on, labeling it as, you know what, it is what it is. And I'm going to get through it no matter what, because I always come out on top. Okay. Draw a little mountain over here. You always come out on top. Okay. And so the emotional state is the one that sends the frequency out there. Okay. And is reflected back to you. So if you have a very calm, collected, and positive mental attitude type of baseline energy and feelings, right, and an emotional state, that's going to be broadcasted out, and you're going to get that type of result and outcome from someone who actually has a very solid, positive mental attitude. Okay. And another thing to keep in mind here is that you want to signal always that you are already that person. Okay. If you are trying to make more money, let's say you are doing 50K a month, and you want to take on and get the outcome and the result of someone who's making 100K. Now, you need to be operating and signaling from a 100K version perspective, okay, lens right now, because what that's going to do is it's going to broadcast the signal that you are already here. And obviously you're not going to be at that 100K right here, right now, in terms of physically where your numbers say that. However, you are operating from this 100K perspective mindset version. And then that signals that you are not trying to need this and trying to achieve it. You are already operating from it. So then it starts to manifest externally in the real world, and you start attracting it to you because you are already the version of you that is 100K per month, right? That's the really important factor here in terms of the emotional state and the power of the signal. Step number 3, you want to generate aligned action. This is where you want to act like that version every day. Just like I mentioned here, in terms of you broadcasting the signal of someone who is already making 100K per month. You're taking on that whole entire identity in your actions and your thoughts and your perspectives, right? All of that. That's the whole acting like that version right here, right now, every single day. Because it's important for you to also realize that your identity is not just built off of who you think you are or your perspectives or your views. What's really one of the biggest driving factors here is in terms of your identity is evidence. Evidence to your subconscious that you are actually this new version of yourself, okay? Because you need to show your subconscious and your nervous system that you are somebody who is and acts and has this identity of someone who is already having the results and the outcomes that you want, which is this 100K per month, okay? And your actions ultimately provide the evidence. And really think about what the version of you, let's say you're right here making 50K, what does a version of you do on a daily basis? And then what does a version of you that makes 100K per month do differently on a daily basis? And really ponder on that and lay it all out so that you know what you need to do in terms of the action steps so that you can provide evidence to your subconscious, to your nervous system to accept this new version of you. Step number 4, N, neutralize neediness. This is where you need to detach from outcome obsession. Let's say that you are stepping into this version of you that has this 100K per month type of revenue. And month 2, you come in and you're like, man, I don't know if this is ever going to happen. Like, I don't know what's going on. I'm doing all this stuff here. I'm providing evidence. I'm taking daily action, but I just don't see it. It's never going to happen exactly and precisely as you envision it. It's going to be something where you start to naturally build up to it, right? Just think about when you have a straight line like this, okay? And this can be like point A, point B. Now, in order for you to get to point B, this whole distance needed to be traveled, but you didn't travel it in one go, right? You didn't just go from here to over here. You went step by step, right? Small steps that eventually you got to point B and you're like, holy smokes, I'm here. It just happens. However, it's a buildup and it's a progression. It's not going to be immediate. And I think that's where a lot of people lose their trust in themselves to actually achieve and get the result that they want, is because they see all these steps that are taking. And what happens is most people will stop right here. They'll hit a wall and they'll say, you know what? I don't see it yet. And I don't know why I keep doing this. And, you know, I'm not getting the result. I'm actually maybe taking some steps back and all this stuff, versus trusting in the process, right? That whole self-trust of trusting yourself to figure it out and to make things happen, and knowing that you are operating from the emotional state and the baseline of somebody who already has what you want, which is the version of you, which is V2, that is making 100K per month. But you stop prematurely, and so then you wonder why you're not getting the results and the outcome that you want, because you're not keeping steady and you're not patient enough to understand that it's going to take time to reflect externally. And ultimately here, what I want you to understand is that when you are obsessing over an outcome that you want to be here, this B, and you're just freaking out about it, and you're putting out this energy and this frequency of like, hey, I don't have it, I must have it, then you broadcast unknowingly scarcity. Okay? And this is no bueno, because it doesn't get you what you want. You need to be already operating from the states and the understanding that you already are here. Okay? And if you're operating from here, that you need it, you must have it, you're actually repelling it. Okay? Step number 5, E, expand self-trust. This is where you want to keep the promises you make to yourself. Now, this can be as simple as you just setting a time every single day that you're going to do something. Think about you going out and checking the mail at a certain time every day, or you getting up at a certain time every day, or you just doing something that can become a ritual or a daily type of activity that you do every single day at that exact time, no matter what. And that is such a powerful thing that you can do for yourself, because it builds up your own self-trust in yourself, so that you can trust that you're going to actually do what you say you're going to do. It builds up your will, it builds up your willpower and your ability to then take on new and different things, because you trust yourself to make it happen, to take action, to put in the effort, the activity, right? All of that. And the way that I want you to think about this is that self-trust is the internal signal that determines everything external. Okay? And so when you continue to do exactly what you say you're going to do and follow through with it, you start to train your subconscious that you're somebody who's reliable. And that changes how you act and how you show yourself and the message that you convey when you step into a room. Because confidence is simply the result of being someone who follows through. So let's go to the final step here. T, transmit consistency. Your consistency is a signal strength. Think about, like, if you have one of those old school radios and you're tuning the frequency of the radio station for you to get on, like, let's say 93.3. But if you, for some reason, have the frequency that is not stable, then it's going to keep bouncing around and going to 94, 95, 96, and it's not going to stay on the, let's say, 93, because you're all over the place. You're not consistent. You're inconsistent. So it's going to always be adjusting up and down, right? You want to have it like this. Okay? A very straight line. Because if you're inconsistent, remember, you're like this. It's the same thing for us as individuals, right? The frequency, just like a radio station that you're being broadcasted out there, right? It needs to have consistent baseline frequency so that it can read the signal. And so think about it. When you have one aligned conversation, one regulated emotional state where you're going through something and you realize that you're going to act a certain way or you're feeling a certain way, and you take a couple deep breaths, a few deep breaths, and you're like, and you're regulating your emotions, your feelings, right? You're calming yourself down, and you're doing that consistently. And you have a bunch of moments of self-trust where you're reliable with yourself. You're telling yourself that you're going to do something, and you consistently keep doing it day in and day out. Doing all of that on a consistent basis, that's what builds your magnetic frequency. But it needs to be consistent. It needs to be constant. So let's do a recap here. So first thing we want to do is we want to match the identity of somebody who naturally has what you're building towards. And then you want to anchor the emotional states. You want to stabilize your internal environment. And this is where you are already acting from the version of you that, in terms of like your emotional state, that has this 100K per month type of version of you, right? That income level. And then you're labeling things, challenges, problems, hiccups, whatever that may be, as just stepping stones for you to get to your desired outcome, your desired reality. Generate aligned action. You're acting always from the perspective and the version of yourself that has already this 100K per month. And it's giving you constant evidence that's training your nervous system and your subconscious mind. And then you're neutralizing neediness. You are not ever wanting, needing, or obsessing over getting your desired outcome result here in section B. You are always thinking from and acting from and being from that version of you that already has the outcome that you want. Because if not, if you're needing it, you're obsessing it, you're repelling it with scarcity signal. Okay? And then expand self-trust. Always keep the promises that you make to yourself. When you say that you're going to do something, always do it no matter what. And then transmit consistency. When you transmit a consistent signal, that tells your subconscious and your nervous system that you are this new version and this is your new norm, right? Like you are currently at a ceiling. And then when you do all these new activities and you're consistent with it and you start acting from that version of you that's already at that 100K, now your ceiling rises because your nervous system and your subconscious mind read all the consistency as like, okay, this is a new level here. Let me adapt everything to this. Now, I want to ask you some questions. What signal are you currently sending to your most important conversations? What is the gap between the identity that you're currently building in your strategy and the identity that shows up when pressure arrives? What would it look like if those two were finally the same person? Because ultimately, when you're trying to magnetize what you actually want and to draw it to you and bring it to you, it's all about alignment with the version of you that you actually want and have it be sustained over time. You see, your reality is already responding. The question is only whether it's responding to the version of you that's performing, or the version of you that has already arrived. When the signal is clear, your reality starts responding to someone it finally recognizes.